Take a good look at yourself. You and that kid bring nothing to this family." My father's voice cut across the table. My mother didn't blink. She only nodded once, like the verdict had been rehearsed. The dining light hung low, casting a dull ring across the plates. Steam from the pot drifted in thin lines before collapsing into the air. A chair leg scraped somewhere behind me. Someone inhaled too sharply. The room paused around their words as if waiting to see what I would do. My father sat angled back, one arm thrown across the chair I bought. His fork tapped the rim of a bowl. My mother kept her hands folded on her lap, thumbs moving in slow circles. She watched me the way people watch a glass about to slip from a counter. Across the archway, my son lingered in the hallway. He froze when my father raised his voice. His workbook hung from one hand, the corner touching the floor. A neighbor's porch light spilled through the window behind him. The soft glow outlined his silhouette like he wasn't sure if he should step forward or disappear. The house held a strange quiet. The refrigerator hummed once, then stopped. A phone vibrated on the counter, screen face down. No one reached for it. Even the ceiling fan seemed to slow. The smell of reheated stew clung to the air. My mother shifted her gaze toward the doorway, checking whether anyone else was listening. She didn't hide it. She never did. A spoon rolled slightly on the table beside her wrist, metal knocking against wood. My throat stayed still. My hands stayed still. The only thing moving was the pulse in my wrist, steady against the edge of my sleeve. I stood there. This wasn't the first time. A sheet of paper lay near my father's elbow. It had been there the whole time. Edges curled. Ink smudged where a thumb had pressed too hard. He slid it a little by accident when he struck the table. The corner lifted just enough for me to see the heading, not the words, just the shape of them. Sharp. Oficial. My mother noticed the shift. She placed her hand over the page as if covering a stain. Her fingers stayed spread, hiding whatever they didn't want me to read. The paper bent under her palm. A faint crease formed down the center. I didn't reach for it. I didn't move at all. The light overhead flickered, once, before settling again. My son eased back behind the archway. His sock brushed the wood floor. My mother's eyes snapped toward the sound, and then back to me, checking whether I still understood my place. I let the silence anchor itself. My fingertips lowered to the edge of my plate. I pressed lightly. Porcelain stopped its tremble. The warmth from the food had faded, leaving only the feel of the glaze under my thumb. I set my fork down, teeth of the metal resting flat. No sound, no challenge. My gaze drifted to the paper under her hand, then to the doorway, then back to them. My father smirked, thinking my quiet meant surrender. He didn't realize it was the only language I had left for truth. I straightened one sleeve, a simple motion, enough to steady the air between us. They waited for a reaction, any reaction. I gave them nothing. They didn't know it yet. But this scene had been written long before dinner. The first slips were small. My mother used my card at the grocery store for speed. She handed it back with the receipt folded inside. The ink still warm. The total sat at the bottom like a quiet tap on the table. I didn't say anything. The scanner beeped behind us. A cartwheel rattled over a loose tile. She walked ahead as if the purchase had always belonged to her. Another day. My father borrowed my spare keys. He returned them with a new tag attached, one I didn't recognize. The plastic clacked against the counter, a hollow sound in the morning light. He said nothing. I said nothing. The keys stayed where he left them. The extra tag swinging lightly every time the fridge door closed. The pattern sharpened when I watched them praise my brother in front of me. We stood in the hallway of the house. My father held a printed estimate for a repair he needed. The paper curled at the edges from humidity. My mother brushed lint off my brother's jacket while he leaned against the wall, thumbs hooked in his pockets. The neighbor from across the street, Mara, paused on the walkway outside. She carried a stack of mail tucked under her arm. A small bracelet slid up and down her wrist each time she shifted the envelopes. Her gaze caught the scene through the open door. She didn't step in. She didn't speak. She just stood there long enough for me to know she had seen. My father waved the estimate once. He handed it to my brother, not me. "No one handles things like he does," he said, his voice steady. My mother nodded as if sealing a decision. The hallway light cast a sharp line across the paper as my brother folded it and slipped it into his jacket. Mara turned slightly, eyes lowered, then continued along the walkway. Her shoes tapped the concrete in an even rhythm. She didn't look back. On the dining table behind us, another envelope lay half open, a bill with my name on it, their address, and a note scrawled in the margin that didn't belong to my handwriting. The corner lifted when the air vent switched on. It fluttered once before settling again. I didn't touch it. I only watched the ink. The pattern had been there for years, hiding in plain sight. The break came on a Thursday. I opened my laptop before work and found an alert sitting at the top of my inbox. Access changed. Black letters on a white bar. Ire really plays in playing. No explanation. No greeting. Just the shift. I clicked once. My name had been removed from the shared account I created for the house repairs. My father's name remained. My mother's name remained. My brother's name had been added in bold, as if the system wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. A second tab blinked at the bottom of the screen. A scanned document waited inside. My signature, cropped and placed on a line I hadn't signed. The cut wasn't clean. The pixels around the edge gave it away. A faint gray halo where someone had lifted it from another file. The timestamp sat in the corner. Midnight. Someone had moved fast. I closed the laptop halfway. Not shut. Just enough for the screen to dim and show my reflection for a moment. Weeks after that, decisions passed without my name. Family messages went out in group threads I was no longer in. My mother hosted a meeting at my own table. Chairs pulled out. Papers stacked. My seat left empty. My father slid forms across the wood, scratching his pen against the lines where my name used to be. He didn't glance toward the hallway where I stood. He didn't need to. The pattern had already placed me outside the frame. My voice thinned in the house without a sound. I signed things I didn't want to sign. I waited outside conversations. I knocked before entering rooms I paid for. One afternoon, a letter arrived with a memo number I didn't recognize. It sat at the top of the page like a small warning light. No explanation. Just a string of digits and a note about an adjustment to the account I no longer controlled. I set it on the kitchen counter. The paper curled upward, lifting slightly each time the air conditioner turned on. I took a photo, then slid it into a folder on my phone. Nothing more. That evening, my family spoke around me as if I were part of the furniture. My mother rearranged her coat on the hook I installed. My father tossed his boots near the door I repaired twice. My brother dropped a new key tag on the table, another one I didn't recognize. I watched their movements, the small claims they made, the quiet ways they shifted the house until it barely felt like mine. A simple truth settled in my chest. I had stood still long enough. The house settled after they went to bed. The hallway dimmed to a thin line of light under their door. The air conditioner clicked once, then slipped into a low hum that barely touched the walls. I sat at the kitchen counter. The paper from earlier lay in front of me. The crease down its center caught the glow from the stove light. I rested one finger on that line. No pressure, just contact. A spoon on the drying rack shifted when the vent turned on. The metal tapped the edge of the sink and stayed still. Curtains at the window moved half an inch inward, then drifted back. The refrigerator door seal tightened with a pop. I opened my laptop without sound. The screen rose slowly, washing my hands in cold light. I dragged the first set of files into a new folder. Date, sender, attachment. I renamed each one in the same pattern. A soft click followed each confirmation. I placed the envelope with the memo number beside the keyboard. The corner curled upward. I pressed it flat with the back of my hand before sliding it into the scanner tray. The machine woke with a low mechanical breath. A beam moved across the glass, steady and white. The digital copy appeared on my screen a moment later. Next came the recordings. I trimmed the dead air at the start. I marked the timestamp. I exported them into a separate folder labeled the same way as the others. The tiny progress bar filled in a silent crawl. I stacked printed pages in one pile, digital files in another, loose notes in a third. Each stack faced the same direction. Each binder clip closed with a single, clean snap. A faint tapping sounded from upstairs, my son turning in his sleep. The pipes behind the wall shifted as the heater changed cycles. Nothing else moved. I reached for the paper my mother tried to hide. The ink smudge sat near the margin, still faint. I slid it into a clear sleeve. The plastic whispered when it sealed. My laptop screen dimmed after a minute of stillness. A small reflection appeared again my face, steady, framed by the glow. I dragged one last file into a folder named for the month. The system asked if I wanted to replace the older version. I clicked yes. The sound was almost nothing. I didn't search for more. Everything I needed was already here. The porch light clicked on when Mara stepped up. She held a slim folder under one arm. The edges were sharpened by the cold air outside. She didn't cross the threshold until I opened the door wider. She glanced at the stacks on my counter, the envelopes, the labeled files, the quiet order of it all. "Which one first?" she asked. Her voice was low, steady, only that. I handed her the paper with the forged signature. She slid it into a sleeve, pressing the air out with the side of her palm. Her bracelet slipped down her wrist again, the tiny beads tapping once against the plastic. She nodded toward my laptop. I brought it over. We moved without speaking. I forwarded the repair estimate email to her subject line unchanged. She typed one line back to me from her own address. Received. Confirm for record. I clicked reply. Yes. Keep this thread. A clean digital trail. Next came the scans, page by page. The documents passed under the scanner's light. The machine hummed at a pace that felt almost intentional. Mara stamped dates on the printed copies with a portable seal she carried for work. Each press landed with a soft, precise thud on the wood. When everything was in order, I opened the family group thread. I created a new message. Simple, direct, dinner at the house. Tomorrow. 6. No explanation. No apology. Read receipts appeared one by one. Green dots. Then silence. I printed the final PDF. The pages were warm when they slid out. I placed them in a plain folder. No label. No marker. The weight of it sat evenly in my hand. Mara set her copy beside mine. "All right," she said. No advice. No warning. Just alignment. I walked her to the door. The night air held still around us. Her bracelet caught the porch light again before she stepped off the mat. I closed the door, locked it once, then again. Everything I needed was in the folders on the counter. I didn't need them to agree. I just needed it recorded. We met in the living room at 6. The curtains were open, letting the last stretch of evening rest across the rug. The overhead light cut a pale circle onto the coffee table, bright enough to mark the center of the room, but not enough to warm it. Mara stood near the bookshelf. She didn't sit. Her folder stayed tucked under her arm, edges squared, waiting. My parents took the couch. My father leaned back like it was his seat by right. My mother smoothed her sleeve, then clasped her hands on her knee. They started before the room settled. My father spoke first, his tone steady, almost bored. He talked about family effort, about everything he had carried over the years. My mother added small nods between his lines, weaving in words about sacrifice and loyalty. She folded each statement with the ease of someone who had practiced the script. My father mentioned the roof repair I paid for. He framed it as something he arranged, something he oversaw. My mother lifted her chin when he spoke, as if the confirmation required ceremony. They kept going. Their voices rose and fell between the quiet clink of Mara adjusting her bracelet. The heater clicked on. The vent blew a thin stream of air that nudged a page on the side table. My father didn't notice. They moved into the familiar rhythm. How much they had done, how much they had given, how much I owed for being part of their home. My brother arrived late, stepping in with his phone still lit in his hand. He took the armchair beside the lamp without asking. He smiled once, the kind that didn't reach anything, then let my parents continue for him. I stood near the table. My hands rested on the back of a chair. No grip, no tension, just contact. The room quieted for a moment, not by design. My father simply ran out of lines. A spoon in the kitchen shifted from the airflow. The metal tapped the counter. My mother's eyes darted toward the sound, then back to me. Waiting. My brother leaned forward. The lamp beside him hummed, a faint buzz. steady and low. I didn't speak. I let the silence draw tight across the room, stretching long enough for them to hear it, long enough for them to realize something else was about to take the floor. I reached for the folder on the table. The cover made a soft scrape against the wood. No one moved while I opened it. The first page slid out. A screenshot. The group thread where my name was removed. My mother's messages. My father's instructions. The timestamp sat at the corner. Small and sharp. I placed it in the center of the light. My brother shifted in his chair. The leather creaked under his weight. I set down the second page. The repair estimate. The one handed to him. Not me. Mara stepped closer. Her bracelet tapped once against her folder as she looked at the signature line. The third page followed. The forged authorization. My signature clipped from another document. The haloed pixels around the edges caught the lamp glow. My mother's hands tightened on her knee. The knuckles rose beneath her skin. I turned one more sheet. The access change alert. A black bar across the top. Names listed. Mine missing. My brother's in bold. The pages sat neatly, forming a quiet row. I didn't speak. I didn't look at them. I only placed one more document on top, a notarized form. Stamped. Dated. Confirming the property belonged to me alone, with no shared rights. Mara touched the edge of it, then stepped back. Her silence was enough. My father leaned forward. His breath hitched once. My mother reached for the armrest but missed it by an inch. My brother's phone lit up with a notification he ignored. I closed the folder halfway, then straightened it. Everything of mine, I said, is no longer tied to you. My voice stayed level. No rise, no weight added. I handed Mara a second copy. She slipped it into her bag. The zipper moved in a clean, controlled line. On the table, the documents remained in the circle of light, a small collection of truths they couldn't talk over. I picked up the folder. The chair under my hand stayed still. No tremor. The accounts are closed. The access is revoked. The house stays with its owner. Each line was simple procedure. Steps already filed. Decisions already entered. My mother tried to speak, but only a thin breath came out. My father sat back. His glass tipped slightly. A drop slid down the side. My brother looked at the pages again. His jaw moved once, then stopped. I turned toward the hallway. Everything had shifted. Everything was in its place now. Morning light slipped across the floor in a narrow band. The house held still. Only the kettle made a soft click as it warmed. I walked through the living room. The chairs stayed where they were left last night. The documents were gone. The table remained clean, the wood showing its grain under the pale glow. The fridge hummed once. A cabinet door eased shut from the draft. Curtains brushed the window frame with a slow, steady sway. I set one plate on the counter, only one. The quiet around it settled into place. I filled a cup with water and let the tap run until the stream cooled. The sound was thin, even, unbroken. My phone lay face down near the sink. No new alerts. No threads asking for answers. I didn't reach for it. I moved a chair back to its original corner. The leg touched the wall with a soft tap. It fit the space again. Nothing pressed against it. Nothing claimed it. Upstairs, a door opened. My son's footsteps padded across the floor in slow, sleepy intervals. He didn't pause at the top of the stairs this time. He just came down, found his seat, and opened his notebook. A pencil rolled toward him. He caught it with one hand without looking up. The house breathed in a steady rhythm, a rhythm I hadn't heard in a long time. I placed the kettle on its base. The light blinked once. Steam rose in a thin ribbon that drifted toward the window. I didn't speak. I didn't think about last night. The room answered for me in its own quiet order. In the family thread, no one mentioned the meeting, but the messages came quicker. Short replies, punctual, clean. I opened the back door. Cool air moved across the threshold, carrying the scent of damp soil from last night's rain. The hinges gave a soft groan, and then quieted. A small plant sat on the porch rail, its leaves tilted toward the morning. I lifted it with one hand. The ceramic base was cool and smooth. A bit of water pooled near the rim. I brought it inside and set it near the window, where the light reached without effort. My son leaned against the counter, pencil tucked behind his ear. He watched the steam drift from the kettle, then returned to his page. The line of his handwriting stayed steady across the paper. I opened the window above the sink. A breeze slipped in and lifted the edge of a dish towel. It settled again without falling. The house was quiet. Not empty, just quiet. I touched the frame of a picture on the shelf, straightened it, let it rest. Sometimes, leaving a table is the clearest way to stay whole. I stood there a moment longer, then stepped back. I keep my silence, and my silence keeps me.